What's good, everybody? It is episode 70 of the Standing Eight podcast. I'm Aaron Sorial from Los Angeles. With me are the usual suspects Courtney Tanner, Tommy Russ Jr. Michael Gomes is dealing with the hurricane on the East Coast. Our thoughts go out to Gomes and family, as well as all the East Coast residents on stateside. Our thoughts go out to we wish and we wish and hope that you'll weather the storm as best as y'all can. So stay safe out there. But welcome, gentlemen. We got a lot of boxing to discuss, a lot of pent up energy to unleash in tonight's episode. First on the agenda is last night's welterweight championship between eight division champion Manny Pacquiao and 2008 bronze Olympian from Cuba, Yordenis Ugas. Pacquiao was the challenger to Ugas' Super WBA title. Ugas came in as a replacement for Errol Spence Jr., who was forced to pull out due to an eye injury. It was about 2 weeks left before fight night when Ugas was called in. So obviously Pacquiao had very limited time to prepare a game plan for Ugas, but we'll be talking about that aspect more later on. As for the actual fight, there were a lot of swing rounds, most of which I scored for Ugas. Despite Manny's aggression on the surface, I felt that Ugas was landing the more clean shots. He didn't really have to do much beyond his given advantages with that height and reach. He was able to irritate Manny with a double jab, and when the opportunity came, he landed the right on numerous occasions, whether it be to the body or upstairs behind Pacquiao's guard. And Corny and Tommy, we all know Pacquiao. He's very vulnerable to right hands, especially against taller fighters. He wasn't as mobile as he was against Keith Thurman 2 years ago. Noticeably slower and more off balance when he tried to pivot off those combinations. That rust in Pacquiao allowed Ugas to push back, keeping the fight away from the ropes majority of the fight. My scorecard, I scored the fight 9-3 for Ugas, one round off from the two 116 112 scorecards in the unanimous decision win for Ugas. But let's bring on our panelists in. Let me start with you, Courtney. What is up, man? Let's get your rundown of the fight, man.
Hey, as always, it's a pleasure and an honor to be on with you fine gentlemen. We reiterate prayers to Michael Gomes and everybody on the East Coast dealing with that hurricane and that situation. We obviously we hope the best possible outcome for not only our brother on here, Mike Gomes, but everybody in that affected area. Um, but hey, once again, honored to be on with you guys. And let's go ahead and do away with the pleasantries and engage in this war of words. Um, hell of a card last night, man. Even the undercard of that was fake decent for our Chicago people out there. The undercard was fake decent, man. We had a little novelty fight as the co-feature with Robert Guerrero and Victor Ortiz. Mark Maceo, what I'm saying, had a devastating knockout. And up and rising boxer from Phoenix, Castro, got that late stoppage over Escondon. So I can't complain about it, man. Usually when you have these high profile, these big cards on pay per view like that, more often time than not, and typically when some promoters rather than others are involved, we tend to get a really good fight as the main event, and the undercard is just fillers. You real. I think the notion that's been long held is if the pay per view has at least one fight that could stand on its own as a headliner on the undercard, off that card. Let's say I think Mark Maceo and Seha that could have been a headliner on Fox. Victor Ortiz and Robert Guerrero that had headline appeal as well. So a great card, and the main event it was an exciting fight. It didn't disappoint. Like many other people at the outset, I predicted that Manny Pacquiao would win the fight by unanimous decision, and that result is obviously the opposite of that. Um, the main reasoning behind my prediction initially was I think Ugas has demonstrated himself in the past to be flat-footed, and I thought Manny Pacquiao was going to be too mobile. I thought if Manny Pacquiao brought any of the remnants of himself in from his last fight with one-time Thurman, it was just going to be too much for Ugas. I anticipated an exciting fight. I anticipated it was going to be close in spots. I expected Ugas to look good in spots, but ultimately I thought Manny Pacquiao was going to come out with a wide decision on the scorecards, and obviously it was Ugas. Man, Ugas fought beautifully. Ugas was disciplined. He was poised with the jab. It was one of those things where Manny Pacquiao, he a lot of times he comes out and he jumps on his opponent, right out the gate. And the way Ugas responded with the double jab and then went to the body, circled out, I was like, you know what? I saw that and I was like, this is gonna be an interesting night for Pacquiao, and Pacquiao is gonna have to make adjustments, and that was something he was not able to do in that fight. Obviously, at the end, post-fight interview, he complained of tightness, and he complained about having trouble adjusting to the stylistically to Ugas, and all those things are going to be expected. Aaron, me and you were discussing on the air with Pacquiao, with him being up there in age 42, which is ancient for a boxer, and doubly ancient for someone who is at 147. Along with a 2-year layoff, it was just it would have been it was a steep hill to climb. It would have been a steep hill to climb for anybody in their prime to come in and face a guy like Ugas, or to face a guy who's worth his salt at any division. And so, the Manny Pacquiao that we saw last night against Ugas, if that had been Spence in there, and I'm saying it, detached retina be damned, it would have been that. I think that would have been a very nasty outcome.
Yeah.
Those rights Ugas was connecting with, if Spence would have gotten off like that and had a clear lane like that, I think he would have folded. He would have folded Pacquiao, and the same boats for Terrence Crawford. I think against either of those guys, it would have been a very awful outcome for Pacquiao. So I think we were in for a treat because it was a good slash of styles with Pacquiao's mobility and his work rate against Ugas being having that classic Cuban amateur style. So that, I think that in itself, it made for an intriguing matchup and a good fight. But I think I would much have rather seen what we saw last night, as in a good fight, toe to toe, the clash, the blend of styles, as opposed to Spence or Terrence Crawford going in there and just rocking him and seriously hurting him. Everybody knows. I've made the statement many times. I'm not a fan of Pacquiao above 140 pounds. The Pacquiao from 112 to 135 was a huge fan. Is still a huge fan. I still go back and I watch those fights. But this iteration of Manny Pacquiao, not my favorite, but at the same time, you can't be a boxing fan and not not recognize his relevance to the culture and to the game. And you have to put a great deal of respect on that, his name and what he's accomplished. And I think a lot of people talk shit on the boards, on social media, but I don't think anybody wants to see him get Marquez that night. I don't think anybody really wants to see him go out on that note. I know that I don't. But I think that's the outcome we get if he gets in there with Spencer Crawford. Even at this point, I think that could be the outcome against a Mikey Garcia or even a Danny Garcia. If we're looking at the prospects of him fighting on beyond this and getting one more fight in, they're really going to have to match Pacquiao carefully, I think, based on what we saw against Ugas. And that's not to take anything away from Ugas. Ugas is from he's world class, amateur world champion, coming from that Cuban school, Olympic bronze medalist, and we talk about pedigree a lot, from the amateurs coming up to the pros. We know Manny Pacquiao turned pro at 16 years old, as 98 pounds. he basically didn't have the amateur pedigree. He didn't have any amateur experience. This was a guy who came up from the streets of Manila, who was basically fighting for sacks of rice to feed his family, as opposed to Ugas, where he was basically recruited from a very small age to be refined in the school and to be schooled in that Cuban style. So I think what we demonstrated last night, where it applies to the amateur pedigree, is that Ugas is used to coming in and fighting guys on short notice with his with his vast amateur, international, senior level experience. That's you're fighting in brackets. You could fight one guy, you could fight another guy, depending on who wins and who loses in your bracket. So I think that was when we saw the video before the pay-per-view started, where Ugas was walking into the gym and saying he's happy, he's jubilant, he's ready for this assignment. As opposed to Manny Pacquiao, there was no footage, so there was no real insight into how he was dealing with the switch, with it switching up. But when it was announced that Spence was going to be dropped from the card due to the detached retina. So and then he spoke on it afterwards with him saying he had trouble with the adjustment because he trained for Spence and got Ugas. Ugas was training for Marcos Maidana's little brother Fabian and got a Pacquiao. So I think seeing how they both dealt with that in the ring, that demonstrates a lot as it applies to how the amateur pedigree applies into the pro game. And Ugas had it, Manny Pacquiao did, and the result was indicative of that.
Yeah, and to answer your point, Ugas, he had the benefit because he was training year round, like essentially 24/7 for any style. As where Manny Pacquiao, he was training for one specific style in Spence. And before I go to Tommy, Corny, speak on you alluded to this in the group that Pacquiao left his best in training camp. Speak on that, and I think you already alluded to, but speak more on that if you can.
Yeah, it's you use it's like it's basically it's a basic tenet of any type of physical activity. I think you use different skill sets, you use different muscle groups depending on what you're doing. And in boxing, you train one way for an opponent and you train another way for another. I think he was in the gym. He got ramped up, and I'm saying when he was training, his body was trained for what it needed to do for fighting a fight that a Spence would have brought to him. And seeing that Ugas brought a whole different style to him, I just don't think his body could adjust. He was complaining about tightness around his legs. I think and a big thing is when you relieve tightness is with Manny Pacquiao, he's perpetual motion. Those legs have to keep pumping. So I think in training for Spence, he was anticipating that he was going to have to be up on his toes, and fighting and circling and going in and out and fighting a fight where he was highly engaged at different ranges. Against Ugas, where Ugas is more of a stationary fighter, he pretty much had to plant his feet, sit down in shots, and hunker down in the pocket against Ugas. When the difference between that is, when your legs are conditioned to keep going, and you're fighting a fight against a guy like Ugas where you're stationary and you're not moving as much, those legs, that lactic acid in your legs, it's gonna build up, and that's gonna bring tightness to those legs. So I think that was a big factor in him basically wanting to do one thing and his body not responding to it. And also, 42 years old, coming off a 2-year layoff, that's going to affect anybody in their prime. So basically, him at that age, going in and fighting at this level after all that time, I think I think we just saw a fight in a scenario where Manny wanted to do one thing and his body was just not going to let him do that. And so, I think all those things were a factor. Also, one more thing is, he said he made the comment that he trained harder for this fight than he did against one-time Thurman. If we, for all those who saw the Thurman fight, that was a physically taxing and grueling fight. And he was properly conditioned for that. So if he went a step and conditioned his body beyond that, I think we're looking at a real scenario where he left the best of himself in the gym and couldn't bring that into the ring when it mattered the most.
Good points, Corny, and I agree with your statements as far as leaving it all in the best, leaving his best in the ring, um, not knowing that he had to fight. He was going to fight a replacement. Let's go to Tommy. What's up, Tommy? Tommy Rush Jr. BSHQ Barbecue. Quick shout out to them folks. If you need some barbecue, hit up Tommy BSHQ. But yeah, Tommy, give us your rundown of the fight, and also I pulled up Terrence Crawford's tweet that you shared in the group. But first, let's give us your rundown of the fight between Pacquiao and Ugas.
Yeah, man. Once again, stay safe, Gone. Stay safe, everybody out east. I thought that the fight was really enjoyable. I had the fight 8-4, and I think that was purely, because I would have had it just like you had it, Aaron, the 9-3, but I ended up giving Pacquiao that first round just off that activity. But I think that it was the first few rounds. It went back and forth a little bit, and I think it was maybe around round 6 and on, just about. Ugas just completely took that fight over. He dominated it. As you all mentioned, that double jab was prevalent all night long. There were several times where he scored that big that right where it wasn't necessarily a hook, and it wasn't like a straight right or overhand, but it was that kind of mixture between both, and it was getting in there almost at will against Pacquiao. You could see several times where Pacquiao would just drop his hands, like he was almost discouraged in the ring, upset, frustrated in the ring. It was not the Pacquiao. Well, let me say this: it was the Pacquiao we should have expected to see, as we talk about. 25 months off, 42 years old. That was the Pacquiao that we should have expected to see. I think that everything that we looked for and hoped for was 100% out of respect of what Pacquiao has always been in his whole entire career. He's overcome so many different odds. He's overcome so many challenges. And he's just been a legendary fighter that comes out victorious, and we expected to see that, but that flat-footed nature, as Courtney mentioned, the complete different style just nullified any game that he had. And I mean, even in the beginning, he did try to jump on him. He tried to jump on him in that first round. Like, he tried to come out with those barrages of punches. But the way that Ugas was handling all of that, like, he knew he knew from the get go, and it became a struggle after a few rounds. As we're seeing in some of the comments, like Daniel D Rock, Ugas his composure. Absolutely. His composure won that fight for him. It was how he managed that fight. He stayed true to his style. He was ready. As we said, he had been training. So the fact that he got through into this fight with Pacquiao was nothing for him. I will say that I was concerned initially before the fight about the bicep. Turns out it wasn't an issue at all. He was throwing that thing all night, so it didn't bother him. It didn't even look like it was a factor at all. But I was initially concerned with that and thought that may have been something that Pacquiao was able to take advantage of. Proved me 100% wrong on that, and he Ugas handled his business in the ring, with greatness, with composure, with bona fide skill and discipline. And he dominated that fight, almost pillar to post. I mean, it was fantastic. And as we all have been talking about and saying, if that would have been Spence or Bud Crawford, it would have been it'd have been a disaster night for Pacquiao.
Go ahead, Corny. You want to add to that?
Yeah. First off, so shout out to Daniel Pena, D-Rock. What's going on, man? And hey, you still have a home here, man. You can come back to the broadcast anytime you want, bro. Hey, just come back, man. Just come back. But hey, anyways, man. Hey, thanks for messing with us, regardless, man. We we hope you're well and your family is too. I want to say this though. There were a few intangibles in that I want to go over before we change gears or change topics too in regards to Ugas and Pacquiao. One is that for Manny Pacquiao's greatness and what he's been able to accomplish in the fight game in this modern era, and what he's been able to accomplish to the forefront of that is, basically we have this period in Pacquiao's career when he hooked up with Freddie Roach and went to the next level. I think the tragedy in this is that, for one thing, Freddie Roach gifted him with the ability to use his right hand and took him from being a one-handed fighter to a two-handed fighter with that, by incorporating that right hand into his game. With that said, the tragedy of that is that you would have thought Freddie Roach, being a Hall of Famer that he is as a trainer, he would have taught Manny Pacquiao to defend against the right hand. And that's one thing we've consistently never seen Pacquiao up his game, in terms of him being listen, it's simple. Manny Pacquiao has been victimized continuously by the right hand his entire career, and last night was a case study in that. Whether it be a right jab when he's fighting lefties, whether it be straight rights, or that overhand right that Marquez was able to fold him with. You see it time and time again, and then when you add size into that, as you mentioned earlier, Aaron. We've seen that against Jeff Horn, and Ugas, who is a welterweight who came into the fight built like a middleweight. When he's in there with guys who are physically imposing and who know how to implement that thudding right hand, that's where Manny Pacquiao has had long nights in his career. And we even saw that before he got up to the welterweight division, when he fought Eric Morales, who was putting the right hand on him. That not only is that I think that's a tragedy in Pacquiao's story or his narrative. It's always going to continually baffle me for the remainder of my days of why Manny Pacquiao could never really seem to get it together in terms of being able to see those right hands and defend against them or to move away from them.
I agree with those right hands, but the thing is, we don't really see that weakness unless he's fighting those taller fighters. But if he's fighting someone of a similar build, like a Mikey Garcia, or the smaller or the smaller welterweights, which Pacquiao was fortunate to face before fighting a full-fledged welterweight, we haven't really seen that right hand apparent. Sans Mayweather and recently Ugas, but good points, Corny. Corny, do you want to respond to Daniel Pena's point? Is Freddie really training Pac at this point? Any thoughts on that, Corny?
I think Freddie Roach has always dealt when it comes to Pacquiao, or in terms of Pacquiao. I think Freddie has always kind of dealt with the scenario where he's training by committee. Whether that's sharing time, basically sharing Pacquiao's ear in the corner with Manny Pacquiao's longtime main man, Baboy, or and oftentimes you see it's the Baboy is the one who's holding the pads for Pacquiao, or whether it's sharing influence in those camps with a million other people. I think I think that's a fair. I think that's a fair question to raise. Is how much has Freddie Roach really done as far as training, especially at this point, in terms of Pacquiao? I think Freddie Roach has given Manny Pacquiao solid fundamentals that he's carried up to this point and that have got him to this point. Um, as far as Manny Pacquiao elevating to who he is as a fighter and as a person and as a personality. I think what we've seen demonstrated throughout the as the years have gone by is I think Freddie Roach has had less of Manny Pacquiao's ear in terms of overall. At one point, it was Freddie Roach was the person to go to for comment in terms of training, how Manny Pacquiao was feeling, how his camps were going, who was in camp with Manny Pacquiao, who he was sparring against, even up to who is going to be Manny Pacquiao's potential opponents next. But now I think the last few fights, I think Freddie Roach has largely been reduced to predictions. And with Freddie Roach, it's always he's predicting a knockout, and those have become more and more sporadic. So, ultimately, I don't know how much training Freddie Roach has done on Manny Pacquiao as of late, but I think that the question would be asked is reasonable.
Good points. Good points, Corny. And Tommy, you brought up this quote by Terrence Crawford in the group. I'll try to read it verbatim. He states, "Looks like Errol Spence Jr. is going to need me after all. I know you're really mad about that fight last night because I was, but not in a hating way, just in a missed opportunity way. Don't beat yourself up about it. Get well, champ." Tommy, since you pulled up that quote, you give us your thoughts about that. About his troll attempt at
yeah, I was about to say, man, how Bud get, man, when his Twitter fingers get to popping, as Courtney say, he get to popping that bubble gum, you know what I'm saying? Like he get on there during these fights, right after the fights, and he just started letting them go. I will say that this win for Ugas is exactly what he's referring to when he's just saying like, hey, looks like you're going to need me after all, because you need that big name. And you were counting on Pacquiao to go ahead and handle business in this fight, win the fight, and then you still be able to recover and have that mega fight, which at this point right now, you're not gonna go and still fight Pacquiao. You're not going to do that. Like you're going to either come my way, which we go back to this same song and dance, about the split and who needs who, or you end up trying to fight Ugas, which won't be as big of a money fight. So definitely he's trolling in this right here, and as he sits and watches all of this, he's very cryptic, but at the same time, he's very open about what he's trying to say, all in the same tweet, basically. And then the kind of the backhanded, get well, you threw that in there just for some pleasantries, but it's always funny, watching to see what Terrence Crawford lets out during some of these main events. And this one, I had to share it, man, because it was ridiculous. Like, here he goes. Didn't take long.
Good stuff, Tommy. Your thoughts, Corny, on this trolling tweet? Does Spence still demand? Does he give him an 80-20 still, or does a little leverage go Crawford's way after what we saw last night? Go ahead, Corny.
The leverage. I don't see how the leverage can go any other way than towards Crawford's way after this.
Yeah.
A lot of people reduce it to Twitter fingers or Terrence Crawford just talking shit, which he does. And what I'm saying, and I think that's a lot of Terrence Crawford's appeal. What I'm saying, he's brash, he's outspoken, he's ghetto. And I think those who do love Terrence Crawford, that's what they love him for. I mean, I know that's what I know that's why I do. But I think if you strip the troll stuff from that and to look at it on, beyond the surface of what he's saying, I think Terrence Crawford is speaking right to the heart of the matter in that, in terms of what Spence's intentions were towards, going forward is, I think, negotiations where Spence Crawford didn't want to fight for what Spence wanted him to fight for, or the amount. Ultimately, I think that's why the negotiations for that, even though they were initial negotiations, I think that's why those fell apart. And I think Errol Spence kind of said, you know what? I mean, my marquee name is going to be this, is Manny Pacquiao. And having this win under Manny Pacquiao on my belt, I'm going to make big money with this fight against Manny Pacquiao. And then, I'm going to be able to go into negotiations for a future fight with Terrence Crawford, saying, I beat a Hall of Famer. Have you? And basically using that as the big chip in negotiations. It's obviously not going to go that way now. So I think what Terrence Crawford is saying with this tweet is that a lot needs to be re-examined now. And the person that needs to do the re-examining and the soul searching now is Errol Spence, by virtue of how everything panned out.
Hey, and then right after that, he said he let off another one saying he was going to 168, saying I can't do this no more. 168, okay.
Now that's some troll shit.
Yeah, big time.
Great stuff. Before we move on to the next major topic in the agenda, shout out to Manuel Dominguez from, as always, En Vivo podcast out in Dallas, Texas. Same hometown as Tommy Russ Jr. He states, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Corny and Tommy. Ugas found a home for that right hand counter, a right to the body very early on. Also kept Pacquiao honest with that stiff jab. Great show, guys. Keep it up. Thank you for the kind words and thank you for your input, Manuel. But let's start with you, Tommy. Anything to add on to that comment?
No, man. I mean, he hit the nail on the head, and we kind of covered that, man. Like he made sure that he established his own early. He let Pacquiao know you're not about to come in here and do the song and dance, bounce around and pop all these crazy angles on me. I'm gonna sit you down real quick. I'm going to make you think about what's going on here. And we saw it. There were some times where he would shoot the straight right, and you would see Pacquiao like jumping, like he was bracing for that overhand, kind of that looping right, counter right, because he had been getting nailed with it all night. We saw him get frustrated early on in the fight, which we did end up seeing Ugas get warned a couple of times about the belt shots, which they were kind of belt shots. I won't say that those were too low, as it was pointed out in the broadcast that you could see Pacquiao was kind of jumping and pushing those down. Those shots were pretty borderline, but clean in my book. But you could see that he was getting frustrated. And when you see a fighter or a boxer that starts to overly pinpoint that type of stuff, their game plan's getting broken up and they're grabbing for something else. And to be honest, Pacquiao used that to his advantage, where he had the ref kind of in his pocket a little bit early to get some help, because those rights, they got established quick, early, and often.
Good stuff, Tommy. Corny, any thoughts to that? And also any other concluding thoughts on Ugas versus Pacquiao?
Hey, first of all, Mr. Manuel Dominguez in vivo. Hey, thank you so much for your question, your participation on our podcast tonight, and basically just for being good partners and good neighbors with us, man. Just proof that this boxing game in this universe and the commentary on such is big enough for all of us, man, and for all unique and varied opinions on the such. And I'm just so happy and proud that we can demonstrate that on our broadcast, and I'm proud to be a part of that. In terms of what he said, though, listen, it's like this: when you're a Manny Pacquiao, it's actually relatively easy for people to get ready for you. because you are a legend. You are a case study on a lot of shit that it takes to do well in the ring. Whether Ugas is, if anything, if you're worth your salt and competing in a weight class with Manny Pacquiao, you're stupid not to study this guy, whether you are going to potentially fight him or not. Because chances are you're going to have common opponents, or you might find yourself in a situation like this where you might have to step up and fill in when somebody falls off a card, and it just so happens that guy you're stepping up to fight is Manny Pacquiao. So I mean, so when you're in Manny Pacquiao's position, it's very easy for people to have the goods on you, and Ugas, going back to him being from that Cuban school and being a cerebral fighter. You can tell he was ready for Manny Pacquiao, and it didn't take much for him to get ready for Manny Pacquiao. I think Ugas, as soon as he got the call and as soon as he stepped inside the gym, he was like, we're going to put emphasis on this right hand because it's out there on wax, several editions that Manny Pacquiao cannot defend against that right hand, against sizable fighters. So I think in terms of that, it was easy for Ugas to scout and be ready and formulate an effective game plan against Manny Pacquiao. Conversely, when you're Manny Pacquiao and you're going up against a guy like Ugas, Manny Pacquiao didn't think in a million years he was going to be fighting Ugas in any scenario. I think the only reason this card didn't get canceled was just because of the length of time. Between Spence falling off the card and it being scheduled, and and this wasn't a scenario where Manny Pacquiao was going to get away with, or going to be able to get away with rescheduling this card because tickets had been bought, a venue had been secured, and pay-per-view had been promoted. And also for Manny Pacquiao he's on a limited time frame because he has a potential presidential run in the Philippines. So, all that, it just made for the perfect storm that worked in Ugas's favor and was very tenuous to Manny Pacquiao.
Great stuff, Corny. So yeah, that concludes this segment of episode 70. Next topic in the agenda, it was the all-action fight between Virgil Ortiz Jr., now 18-0 with 18 knockouts, versus Igidijah's Mean Machine, Kavaliauskas, last Saturday, August 14th. Kavaliauskas was a very formidable opponent with his aggressiveness and counter-punching ability, who nearly scored a knockdown in the second. But Ortiz Jr. would eventually steer the momentum away from Mean Machine, scoring 5 knockdowns, 4 of which came in the deciding 8th round, leading to the technical knockout victory. Tommy, you were there firsthand as a member of the press. Give us your biggest takeaways from that big event for Virgil Ortiz Jr.
Man, my biggest takeaway is look at that boy's chin. Like he showed straight balls in that ring, man. Mean Machine was an outstanding opponent for Virgil, as we saw in that fight. It was a great fight. As you mentioned, the near knockdown. Some people may say that they felt that it was a knockdown. Some will say that they felt like it was partially a slip. But Mean Machine, he came in there to do some serious damage. But he ran up against a young bull in Virgil Ortiz. And one thing that I'll say about Virgil is when he was taking those shots in round 2, he dropped his guard and he got down to the dirty with it. He was like, let's go, let's fight, and you really started to see him bang away. Now granted, there did seem to be in those exchanges a little bit of loss of discipline. But that was the dog in him that came out, where it didn't even matter. And his punches were going to lead the way. And we saw him battle back. And as you said, 5 knockdowns. which just completely began to just overtake Mean Machine and dismantle him throughout the rest of the fight. Ringside, we we had a shout out also in vivo Manny. He was there, and one of his predictions was round 3, and we saw the fight really start to change in that 3rd round as well. So we all got kind of hyped, thinking it was about to possibly happen. The fight raged on, and also definitely got to call out a different prediction. Chris Henderson, C. Hendo, he actually called round 8 for this. We saw that this was Virgil taking care of business in in a better fashion and quicker fashion than Bud did as well. Which was something that was a very big takeaway. And as I think about it, I'd probably say that that's one of the biggest takeaways, because we've heard and seen Virgil talk about this fight. In his hopes and wants to fight Bud Crawford. He said that Bud told him, take this fight. He took this fight, and he finished it better than Bud did. So I think that all in all, that in itself was one of the biggest takeaways. And it was a wonderful performance, a great show. They put on a fabulous show. Had the crowd going crazy in there, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
A good point, Tommy. And yeah, I agree. And also, Virgil, he targeted Mean Machine for one reason only, to sell Crawford the idea that he was more than ready to share the ring with him. Courtney, you want to speak more on that, and also your thoughts on the fight, on his performance as well? Go ahead, Courtney.
I think it can be sold to people who don't know any better. I think it can be sold to. I think it can be sold to your fan base as an arguing point. I think it can be sold to casuals who don't watch a lot of fights. I take nothing away from Virgil Ortiz. I've said from jump, Virgil Ortiz is a special fighter, and he is basically has solidified himself as the standard bearer for Golden Boy as we go further into this next decade and into this next era of boxing. As far as the young guns, the young, the talented, and the beltless out there, Virgil Ortiz is standing at that pole position and at head and shoulders. So that's me giving him his flowers. I don't want nobody to say that I didn't hand them to him. But as far as the narrative is that based on that, it can be sold that off top he's ready. He's ready for Terrence Crawford. He did it better than Terrence Crawford. I think that is a hard notion to sell if you really break that down and examine that. Because if you look at what Terrence Crawford did to Kavaliauskas, Terrence Crawford did that to Kavaliauskas when he was an undefeated fighter. Virgil Ortiz did what he did to Kavaliauskas. Kavaliauskas is one fight removed from that knockout. But I'll say this though, Virgil Ortiz faced the same adversity that Terrence Crawford did when Terrence Crawford fought Kavaliauskas. And he responded to that adversity in the same fashion that that Terrence Crawford did against Kavaliauskas. So I will say for that point, he's made his case, and it's a substantial one that he's ready for the big time. Terrence Crawford has a belt, and I think I think a lot of it gets made because these two have said each other's names. I'll say this: Crawford be damned for a second, because he's one of 3 cogs in the welterweight division in terms of belts, or maybe 4 if you want to put respect on the belt that Jamal James is holding for the WBA, the regular belt for 147. But I hate that it always gets reduced to one guy against the other. I'll say this: Virgil Ortiz is ready for a title shot, whether it be against Crawford. Do I think he beats Crawford at this point? No. Do I think he needs more seasoning to fight a Crawford? Yes. I think there's things that he stands to improve on and learn from. But there also comes a point where we're dealing with this climate promotionally and with the networks right now. There's nothing for him at Golden Boy. So I mean, if it has to be Crawford for his next title shot, hey, let's see it, and I'm going to thoroughly enjoy it as I think everybody else would. But I hate that it always goes against one name. Is Virgil Ortiz Jr. ready for an Errol Spence? Is he ready for a Ugas? Is he ready for Jamal James? I can see him in all those fights. And honestly, I think the bigger fight for Virgil Ortiz at 147 is against Errol Spence because they're both from Dallas. They could feel that they could fill AT&T up with that. And honestly, I think his odds are a little better against the Errol Spence. But I mean, in terms of Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence, Jamal James, Ugas, Jerron Ennis, those are all fights you can see him in. But I mean, the focus is going to be obviously going to be on Crawford because he said Crawford's name, but Crawford has said his. I'm interested to see if there's going to be a path towards each other for those two. But I don't know. I don't know. It's a big I don't know, and it's a lot of questions to ask because Virgil Ortiz is promoted by Golden Boy. It looks like he's going to be with Golden Boy for the foreseeable future, and there's no one else on Golden Boy. Marcus Nall, shout out to Ohio Runs Boxing, though, on a broadcast previously, he did make mention of one name, Rashidi Ellis, who is also with Golden Boy. I think if we're looking at realistic matchups, I think that's the matchup that makes the most sense for Virgil Ortiz in the immediate future. Rashidi Ellis, he's under the radar, welterweight, lightning fast welterweight out of Lynn, Massachusetts. Has been with Golden Boy for years. For whatever reason, I'm of the opinion that Oscar just hasn't been promoting that boy right. But if you go on YouTube, look up Rashidi Ellis, and examine what you see there against the performance that Virgil Ortiz put out against Kavaliauskas. That's an intriguing matchup. And it's a realistic one. So,
very good, very interesting name you put out. Since obviously they're under the same banner. But going back to Crawford, we all know they're very insulated from each other promotion wise. But how about the fact that I'm not putting high hopes on it, but I want to get your take on it, Courtney, as well as you, Tommy. Terrence Crawford's contract with Top Rank, and correct me if I'm wrong, is nearing in October. How much substance do you give to that? And as far as hopes of making Virgil and Crawford happen fairly soon?
Well, I mean, I think it's there really doesn't even be any substance that needs to be put to it. Crawford is gone. He will not. I don't see any scenario where Crawford re-signs with Top Rank. And I don't think, and I don't see it I think it's reciprocal. I don't think Top Rank wants Terrence Crawford back in the stable, simply for the fact that there's nothing they can do with them. That they have expended all possibilities with him on Top Rank as far as who they can offer him as opponents. So that makes them basic. Do I think Terrence Crawford would go free agent or do a one-off deal with Golden Boy in order to face Virgil Ortiz Jr.? We've seen stranger things happen in boxing. I don't think that's an impossibility, but I think where it's going and where the writing on the wall is in terms of Crawford and what his next promotional move is there's on Friday there's going to be a purse bid scheduled that's going to basically offer bids pitting Terrence Crawford and Sean Porter against each other. And we all know Sean Porter is a PBC fighter. I think PBC is going to move very aggressively on that bid. I think Top Rank. I wouldn't be surprised if Top Rank didn't even put in a bid or put in the bare minimum in order to secure that fight. But I think I think if that fight goes to purse bid and PBC wins it, I think that's where Al Heyman is going to show him pretty much lure him as far as, hey, it's better on this side of the fence. And I don't think Al Heyman will really need to sell Terrence Crawford on that, because I mean, if you got two eyes, you can see it. All the welterweights are on PBC. So I think in terms of the fights that can be made and the money that can be made, I think this is this purse bid that's coming up between that's going to pit him against Sean Porter. I think that's going to be the conduit and the segue into Terrence Crawford eventually aligning himself with PBC. But I don't think it's beyond the realm that Terrence Crawford could go promotional free agency or sign a one-off deal with Golden Boy to fight Virgil Ortiz. But I think there's a bit of risk to that, in that if the apple cart does get upset, his belt is in the wind and he doesn't have a home. So I mean, I think the people who are in his ear as far as his management are going to point that out to him. And I don't think the path that takes us to a Terrence Crawford Virgil Ortiz Jr. fight is in a straight line, and I don't think it gets any clearer. I think if anything, it's just going to get murkier. And I've said this for years too: is it's very easy for guys to call each other out and say they want to fight each other when it promotionally and in terms of the networks is not viable. We've seen that time and time again. We saw Manny Pacquiao and Floyd jab at each other for years, knowing damn well the fight wasn't going to get made. We're seeing that with Charlo and Canelo, and Charlo and Triple G, or Charlo and Boo Boo Andre. So I mean, it's very easy for these guys to say, yeah, I want this fight, I want this dude, or this dude's ducking me, or this dude really doesn't want it, when they're on different sides of the fence and they're committed to being on those different sides. So I think this is yet another scenario or a clear example of where we see that. So
great points, Courtney, and I agree. There's a lot of zigzagging and a lot of peaks and valleys that have to be traversed before a Virgil Ortiz Jr. and a Crawford fight happens. Even though Crawford's expiring contract is coming to reality. Tommy, any points you want to add to that as far as the possibility of those two match up really soon and the difficulty for that happening? Go ahead, Tommy.
No, man. I mean, I think Courtney was pretty accurate with it, and I also agree. I do think that he's going to end up on PBC. I think that we've seen the clout or lack thereof to take your talents into that free agent world. You got to really have it. Now, talent wise, does he have it? Yes, but just that following to command it. No, I don't think that that he has enough to kind of move around in that free agent space and just continue to rack up the very, very short 1-2 fight deals. So I do think that he will end up, taking himself over to PBC and trying to be, once he gets over there, maybe trying to be the bully on the block or something, and say, okay, now I'm on this side, and kind of ruffle some feathers in his own camp, in his own promotional company to say, okay, this is what y'all been saying all of this time. Now I'm here. Now let's go. Now what we got, so I could very well see that. And more than likely that is what's going to happen. But as far as Bud and Virgil Ortiz, yeah, if that fight happens, I feel that that's a fight that we may see 2 or 3 fights down the road for Virgil. To be honest, I could see, as was pointed out, Rashidi Ellis. I could see, maybe even something with somebody pushing Thurman. He's been right there on the cusp of these fighters, like just beneath Sean Porter. So I could see even something like that getting pushed together. But I think that there may be, at least to get 2 more fights before we would actually see Bud versus Ortiz.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Great stuff, Tommy and Corny. Before we end it, you know, the next major fight that actually is coming to fruition is Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Plant. There were some problems in negotiations, but they finally etched out the fine details. Corny, your thoughts on them finally, coming into terms and finally get this deal done, and also your quick prediction for the fight. Go ahead, Corny.
Okay, before I get into that, I want to say one more thing on Virgil Ortiz and his prospects for the future.
Yeah,
I mentioned Rashidi Ellis earlier on. I also think by virtue of him fighting on DAZN and Matchroom Promotions being exclusively on DAZN now, I think we also have to look across the channel, or the Atlantic for Virgil Ortiz too. I think Conor Benn, who's making a lot of noise as a young welterweight prospect over in the UK. I mean, it can even be said Conor Benn is probably the British Virgil Ortiz. I think that can go off. I think that can pop. There's also 2 other Brits who are friendly and aligned with Eddie Hearn, even though I don't think they're necessarily still signed to him. You got Kell Brook, and you got Amir Khan, and I feel like Amir Khan and Kell Brook are in the category where they're being inserted into the welterweight picture when fights can't get made or a guy needs a fight. And I'm kind of tired of seeing that. I'm kind of tired of seeing Kell Brook get a fight with a top welterweight because they don't want to fight each other, or Amir Khan get a fight with a top welterweight because none of them want to fight each other. But I mean, I think that's the way of the world right now in boxing. And I would not at all be surprised if it was if we eventually saw a Virgil Ortiz fight against an Amir Khan or a Kell Brook or a Conor Benn. So, but I mean, the Conor Benn fight that's actually low key intriguing.
Yeah, I like that one.
It does Eddie Hearn, because there's so much upside to Conor Benn, especially with that name, and coming at the end of it. Is he willing to risk that upside in his development against a Virgil Ortiz? I don't know. Oscar De La Hoya, we've seen him time and time again willing to risk his top prospects' O's or their donuts. We'll see if Eddie Hearn is that fearless. I think a lot of times with Oscar De La Hoya, that's come out of necessity. With Eddie Hearn, there's not necessarily a lot of necessity with that. I think there's a lot of mid-level European, British level guys that Conor Benn can get in with and pack crowds over in the UK. So Eddie Hearn might not be willing to sacrifice Conor Benn like that, but I think if Virgil Ortiz was willing to get on a plane and go over to the UK, I think that's a fight we could see. But I think it would be a scenario where Virgil Ortiz would have to go to UK to do that fight. Now, in terms of Canelo and Caleb Plant, a prediction, I don't even know why we're wasting our times with that. It was like I think on the drama to getting this fight signed was basically making Caleb Plant comfortable with the scenario where he was about to sell his chin to Canelo on the most favorable terms. And I give him props for digging his heels in and getting the most favorable terms that he can live with and he can be comfortable with and that he can secure his and his family's future off of. But I mean, in terms of a prediction, man, I mean, I don't know. I mean, are we predicting what round Canelo knocks Plant out in?
Pain.
Are we predicting how many rounds Plant can hang in there?
I should have prefaced my question clearer, but
I think
I'm in
Canelo's
agreement.
going to put Caleb Plant away quicker than he did Billy Joe Saunders. And you know what? You can not only quote me on that, you can screenshot, you can stream, you can cut this and stream it or whatever. Most of all, what I just said, you can thrive on that.
Hey, I got no qualms with your take on it. I actually agree, but I try to present the question from a as neutral as I can standpoint. But I totally agree. I don't see any version of this fight going Caleb's way. But Tommy, give us your thoughts as far as the negotiations that came out to be. Give us your thought on that aspect, and if you want your prediction as well. Go ahead, Tommy.
Hey man, so quickly, as I said, the prediction, Pang. We go Rocky with it. Pang, Clubber Lang. I say round 7 or quicker. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad that they were able to get it done. I mean, this was something that we all knew that Canelo had. He had this marked up like 3 fights ago. He had the whole year of fights planned out, and he told us. He put it out there. You
are next, my friend.
Yeah. You're not supposed to look past your opponent. This dude looked past 3 opponents. Yeah, all of them. He said, I'm fighting him, and then I'm fighting you. So you just sit back there and wait, and let me go through these guys. Went through those guys, and here we are, and I think that, honestly, I mean, they knew that they were going to get this together. They knew that this was going to happen. So I think that, some of the quote unquote failed negotiations that we experienced were part of selling this thing, man. It was part of the promotion. They knew that this fight was going to get put together. So I'm not too many things to say about the actual negotiations, in my opinion, because this was already negotiated by Canelo, at the top of the year. So yeah, let's get to it. I think that the only thing is, Caleb's probably got the small victory of, taking a little bit of control of when the fight happened, because, that was also something that Canelo wanted to have trumps on, which was the top pay-per-view times of the year. So, now what is it, November that this fight is supposed to be happening? So a little bit later than expected, but yeah, it's going down for real. Straight up.
I think Caleb Plant is kind of trying to sell this as, all right, I got the first victory, psychological.
Exactly.
Without negotiations. But he needs to be careful, because he might have just pissed Canelo off. It was like, because Canelo had to move off the September date once again. Where, Canelo has made that big talk in the past about, the Mexican holidays. Those are my dates. Those are reserved for my people, and I am my people's champion.
Exactly.
I'm the top dog, not only internationally in the world, but also I am the people's champion of Mexico. And then it's a scenario where this year, 2021, he's not fighting on Mexican Independence Day, because Caleb Plant wanted to dig his heels in and act a fool. So, I mean, hey, saying toodles to Caleb Plant. If you got, if you really believe you got one, but I think that might come back to haunt him, man. Canelo might come in thinking that because of that, he's gonna make even quicker work of Caleb Plant. So, I mean, I think that's an intriguing factor in it. But to me, I think the only real intriguing thing about this card is what the undercard's gonna look like. But I want to see this fight though, because I want to see history. I'm a big believer in one face, one name, one champion. And I think I think we need champions in this era who, as Floyd Mayweather said, want to clean up boxing. Basically do away with this alphabet soup and be, step up and fight all the champions in their quest to be the champion. And so, that's why I'm really feeling and loving Canelo right now in this era. That's why, I feel he's the standard bearer. And I think his pursuit of this fight with Caleb Plant in order to lock up all the belts at 168 and make history. In that nobody's done it at this weight division. No Latin fighter has ever done it. No Mexican fighter has ever done it. Just to make history on so many fronts. That's big props, and that's big respect to Canelo. And as crass as I've been towards in airing my view towards what Caleb Plant is thinking and how he's conducting himself in negotiations, I think he needs to be commended as well. Because he's the other half of it, getting in the ring with pretty much the baddest man on the planet right now. So, hey, let's see it. I hope it's I don't think it's going to be a good fight because I think it's going to be a quick win. I hope it's a good card, and we get some good undercard fights on there. It's reasonably priced, and it's just a good event for the people.
Hey, that little moral victory that Caleb got, that's the equivalent of got your hat. I think that's exactly what we just said
there, bro. There.
Oh, great stuff, guys. Great stuff. Well, that's going to conclude it for episode 70. Thank you, everyone that rocked with us tonight on this live stream. Shout out to Sean Fitzgerald. Please support his movement. I believe he started a scholarship fund for his Just Boxing Foundation. Very good idea, Sean. And we thank you for coming up with this innovative idea to support up and coming fighters, especially with this scholarship fund. Shout out to you, man. And also Daniel Pena for rocking with us. He was one of the original founding members of the Standing 8 podcast. So gracious enough to join us in this episode. Also, I want to point out that he hit it kind of big in the Pacquiao fight.
Yeah,
I think you saw that. Let's pull it up. So congratulations for Daniel Pena.
Hey, let me get $5. Hey, D-Rock, let me get $5, man. Let me hold $5, man. Come on.
So shout out to D-Rock. Also, last but certainly not least, Manuel Dominguez from En Vivo Podcast. Thank you for your thoughts on shaping the fight, and also, also catching our live streams as well. Big shout out to you, Manuel, and the whole crew at En Vivo Podcast. Also, Jay Molyneux, who quickly
I can't stand that dude.
Hey, he admitted he's a casual.
Much love, bro.
Self-labeled casual.
Dude.
Jay Molyneux from Boston, loyal customer at Sades.
You talk too much shit, Jay.
Shout out to Sades out of Boston. He knows what I mean too. You know what I mean, Tommy Corney as well.
Insider.
Hey, Boston. Hey, nobody from Boston can call into the show anymore. Hey, nobody from Boston can have their comments on the thread. Hey, we boycott Boston. Hey, off the street to Jay Molyneux, man. Hey, man, nobody likes you.
Oh man, but the show doesn't end with me. Let me give Tommy any last words, shout outs you want to give out before we end it. Let's go ahead, Tommy.
Hey, shout out to all of y'all, man. Shout out to Courtney. Shout out to you, Aaron. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Mike, to MG, the great Mike Gomes. Shout out to all of y'all, man. Shout out to everybody that's out there, still grinding away, doing this podcast stuff, this boxing coverage. It's not for the faint of heart. And it ain't easy work. So, we appreciate everybody that's out there doing it. We appreciate everybody that supports, all of you that are listeners, all of you that are followers, all of you that engage and communicate with us and comment, share, all of the support. We appreciate you, all of y'all's families, because this is a dedication, and so, the families that rock with us as well. And shout out to the kids, man. It's back to school. Let's go get some A's. Let's go kick some ass in school. Don't literally kick ass in school, but get some A's. Let's do this. Everybody be safe on them roads.
Corny, what's up? Any last words? Shout
outs. You already know I'm gonna rock the Oscar speech, but I'm gonna do it a little different today, man. I want to shout out to all the area codes, man, and all the regions and everybody who is just making this movement pop and who is just messing with us from far-flung regions of the world, man. So, you know what I'm saying? I'm going to start that off by saying, hey, as a disclaimer, me and Jay Molino, we really don't have beef, man. We just be talking shit to each other on these interwebs. Hey, thank you so much, Jay, for rocking with us and for commenting and being pesky and shit like you always are. I still don't like you, but hey, thank you nonetheless, man. Hey, shout out to Boston, man. Hey, Boston, that's probably our most hardcore, grimiest set of fans on the broadcast. Shout out to NYC. Shout out to Marcus Nall and Tiffany Daniels, the First Lady of Boxing. Ohio runs boxing. Shout out to the whole Midwest. Shout out to Antoine Wilkes out in Boston. Shout out to Brandon Griffith, man, for basically pushing us internationally to where our base, man. Shout out to Europe, everybody in the UK rocking with us, everybody out in Germany, Italy and France, everybody out in the South Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, Tuvalu, American Samoa, Western Samoa, Papua New Guinea, all the far-flung places, man. Hey, it's a movement. We're trying to. If we can broadcast this to space and see what's popping out Mars, we're gonna try to do that, man. We're gonna try to expand this movement.
Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, shout out.
Hey, Tesla, we're gonna try to take this movement as far as we can and reach as many people as we can. As we all know, boxing is a truly global sport, maybe even the most global of sports, and that we have so many people around the world who are rocking with us and taking time out of their evenings, out of their days, in whatever time zones they are, to basically sit down with us and engage in this war of words and do what I love to do best, is just talk some shit and chopping up on this boxing shit. We love you. We thank you all. Please keep rocking with us. Come, bring a friend. Tell them to bring a friend. Tell them to bring their mamas, their cousins, their aunties, their uncles, all those people. Hey, standing 8.
Beautiful words, Corny. As you was also Tommy. Well, that's going to conclude it for episode 70. I'm Aaron Sorial. Have a safe night and enjoy the rest of the weekend. I'm Aaron Sorial. With me is Tommy Rush Jr., Courtney Tanner. Last minute, again, shout out to Michael Gomes. Stay safe out there. And all the residents out on the East Coast, weathering the recent hurricane that's developing. Again, episode 70, the Standing 8 podcast. Stay safe, guys. Peace.